It was not until I moved to the United Kingdom that I realized I was born in one of the world's poorest countries. During one of my research projects for class, when I was about 11 years old, the teacher asked that we present on something that we were extremely passionate about. As the only African kid in my class, I wanted to talk about my beloved country, the warm heart of Africa, Malawi. I wanted to share with my classmates my summer days and summer nights spent at the beach, swimming in the beautiful Lake Malawi. However, when I started to look at the statistics and I started to look at the numbers of Malawi, I realized and I saw that my experience was not the experience of everybody. 11% of Malawi's population was living with HIV/AIDS. When I went home and I asked my mother about some of the things that I had seen and the images that I had come across, she affirmed and told me that the things were true. She went on to share with me some of her experiences working with people affected with HIV/AIDS, as well as family members who had died from HIV/AIDS. As I was talking to her, I remembered a certain image from my childhood when I was still in Malawi at around 8 years old. My mother was looking for a nanny, and a lady came to the house, and with her was a little boy about this big. And the reason that I intensely remember his image is because he had a stomach protruding out of his body, and his legs were very big. I realized that it was because he was malnourished and had probably gone for days without any food. From that day forward, I made a commitment. I made a commitment to myself, and I made a commitment to my world that stories like that of that little boy would never again be heard of in my generation. Because stories of vulnerable people were not part of my experience when I was growing up in Malawi, when my family and I moved to the United States, I wanted to look around in my community to see exactly how it is that I could help, how I could lend a hand. The more I got involved in different communities, I saw the things that my mother had told me about people in Malawi. I saw people struggling with HIV/AIDS. I saw people who came from absolutely nothing, wanting somebody to lend a hand. Inasmuch as I wanted to help people like that little boy from my childhood, I knew that those people around me also needed the help. And when I made the commitment to help my community, it wasn't a commitment just to help Malawians. It was a commitment to help all of humanity whenever I could. So when I applied to the Graduate Institute of Geneva for my master's in development studies, I wrote in the letter that I want to be a part of a generation of people that create a world that is unduly just. However, when the conversation of development started, and I started to hear how people talked about people who are needy, I realized that the conversations were so much about that little boy from Malawi, from my childhood. And for me, it was extremely problematic, because if development is about making a difference, and if development is about transforming lives wherever we can, then the conversation should be about everybody in the world. When I think of the concept of the global South, the idea of the South is something that exists everywhere. Poverty exists as much in the developing world as it does in the developed world. The voices of the people that I worked with when I was in Texas are just as critical and are just as important as the voice of that little boy from my childhood. So if you've had an experience like my own, where you were born thinking you had absolutely everything, to wake up and realize that there are people around you who have absolutely nothing, what would you believe about the world in which we live? What I believe is that I have a responsibility, that all of us sitting here, you have a responsibility to the world in which you live. You have a responsibility to look around in your own communities to see exactly how you can lend a hand. You have a responsibility to look at the homeless people down the street, at your communities of people who are wanting you to be there and help. Here we are, living in the luxuries of what is one of the world's richest countries, Switzerland. But did you know that Switzerland has one of the highest suicide rates by gun in all of Europe? And did you know that it was only in 1990 that women were given the right to vote in one of the cantons? For me, those issues are extremely, extremely critical. They're just as critical as those issues that we talk about happening on the African continent. So it's not just Africa and Africans who need help. It's not just people in Southeast Asia who need help. In Latin America, there are people around in our communities here right now who need all of us to lend a hand. So the question that I have for you, my friends, is how are you going to be a part of the transformation process in your community? How are you going to lend a hand to make sure that we are creating a world that is unduly just everywhere? Thank you.